Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Jansing, live at MSNBC headquarters in New York City. With just 99 days and counting until the midterms, we are on the verge of a huge primary day. 5 states that could provide some previously unexpected opportunities for Democrats. In less than 24 hours, polls will open in Arizona, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington. And spread across those states, some contests that seemed to favor the Republicans a few months or maybe even weeks ago, they could now be closer than we thought. Governor's races are increasingly looking like a bright spot. Among the questions we hope to answer tomorrow, will far-right candidates be able to ride Trump's endorsement to victory? Or has the former president's influence begun to fade? For Trump picks like Arizona's Blake Masters and Kari Lake, as well as Michigan gubernatorial frontrunner Tudor Dixon, all signs point to primary wins. But that could actually be a good sign for Democrats who believe far-right candidates actually help them in the general election, the midterms. Plus, we'll be watching Trump's strength being tested in states like Michigan and Washington, where he's trying to sink 3 of the House Republicans who voted to impeach him after the Capitol riot. And finally, for the first time since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, voters will be heard on that issue, and we'll get our first real clue as to whether abortion rights will be the rallying cry Democrats hope it is. The focus is Kansas, where voters will decide on a constitutional amendment that would essentially clear the way for the state legislature to ban abortion outright. So far, early in-person voting is up more than 200% from 4 years ago, but polling shows the vote itself will be close. We've got reporters fanned out across several of the key states. Michael Steele is with me. He is former chairman of the Republican National Committee, and over at the big board, MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Good to see everybody. Michael, for a lot of folks, tomorrow is an opportunity for Democrats, maybe one they didn't expect if they can seize it. And I think it's going to tell us a lot about former President Trump's influence and power among Republicans. What are you going to be watching for?
I'm going to be looking at those races where, places like Arizona where Trump has been playing a little bit heavy and a little bit hard to see exactly how that shakes out. But I'll be honest with you, I'm really less concerned about who's going to be the nominee for the Republicans going into the fall. What's going to be the real tell is how the Democrats are able to build a strategy off of whomever their Republican opponent is going to be, because at the end of the day, the ball is in their court. They've got to hold serve. They've got to be able to maintain the House and expand a majority against the odds. So the question is, how do they then begin to pivot their narrative around these candidates, whether they're Trump endorsed or not, going into the fall election? So I think you're going to get a very interesting tell about how the Democrats narrate tomorrow's events to sort of set up what they want to do going into September.
I want to get a sense of what we're hearing about some of those key races from voters, and we do have correspondents across the country. I want to start with NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, who is in Phoenix. And Vaughn, there's a number of those Trump-backed candidates there. What is it looking like? Could it be a sweep for the former president?
It could very well be. I mean, this is going to be the ultimate test here. I mean, this is going to be where voters are ultimately going to decide which of these Republicans they put in as their nominees. Look at for not only Attorney General, Secretary of State, for governor. Blake Masters is the U.S. Senate candidate who had just told me last week he would have objected to the 2020 certification process. But the Secretary of State candidate, Attorney General candidate, governor candidate, each of these individuals who could very well win tomorrow have called for the decertification of the 2020 election in the, despite it being 2022, sending of the Trump slate of electors back to Congress instead of Joe Biden's. Of course, that is not possible here. And I think, though, that it's important when we're talking, as Michael was just laying out there, about the general election here. Kari Lake, if she were to be the gubernatorial candidate here, she is the Trump acolyte who has called for the prosecution of 2020 elections officials, the jailing of her likely Democratic gubernatorial opponent, Katie Hobbs. She calls the press the right hand of the devil. All of these things, I think, are important to take into context because she is a very viable general election candidate. Karen Taylor Robson, her Republican primary opponent, has already spent more than $18 million against her in this Republican primary. And despite that amount of spending, 5 times what Kari Lake has put into this, Kari Lake may very well still win this year. And that is where, Donald Trump won, or I should say lost, Arizona by just over 10,000 votes in 2020. How? Because he was able to spike the rural GOP Trump turnout, but then also win a sizable share of Republican voters here in Maricopa County. And, the strategists, not only Republican, but also Democratic strategists I talked to, they believe that Kari Lake could very well pull off a similar type of turnout here in a general election against a Democrat.
So many fascinating angles there. Let's go over to eastern Missouri. Yamiche Alcindor is there. I saw you there over the weekend, Yamiche. The big race, of course, is Roy Blunt's Senate seat. To say there's lots of drama in that Republican primary is an understatement. What can you tell us?
Well, drama, Chris, is completely a key word to use in this race. And this race was already interesting and got a little bit more interesting in the last few hours. So we're talking about two Erics and a Vicky being the leading candidates here. But former President Trump, his endorsement is looming large here. He has not made a decision publicly yet on who he will endorse. And just in the last few hours, he posted online on Truth Social, his social media site, that he is going to make an endorsement in this Senate GOP primary sometime today. We're trying to work our sources to see who that might be and when that might happen. Breaking down who is actually in the race, you have Eric Schmidt, who is the Missouri Attorney General. He is who I'm waiting for right now. He's supposed to be in Washington, Missouri for a campaign event. So if he walks up, we're going to try to hopefully interview him live here with you. He is someone who I've been told is a moderate Republican who has tacked right in order to try to get the support of former President Trump. He is someone who also came out in the last few days against Mitch McConnell as Senate Majority Leader if Republicans were to take back the Senate. And that, of course, echoes the language of former President Trump, who's been criticizing Mitch McConnell after January 6th. You also have Eric Greitens. He is someone who is an embattled former governor of this state. He resigned in disgrace just 18 months after being inaugurated. He is someone who has the support of Donald Trump Jr., but he has a number of allegations against him, including domestic abuse and sexual abuse. I'm told that he has alienated himself from a lot of the Republican Party in this state. And then you have Vicky Hatzler, who is someone who is serving right now in the U.S. House. She voted against certifying the 2020 election. She is loyal to former President Trump, she says, but Trump has already said he will not endorse her under any circumstances. He said that she's just not up for the job, not up for that Senate seat. So all eyes right now are on former President Trump and his social media account to see what might happen in this race. I also, though, want to play some sound of a voter, a Republican woman. Listen to what she told me about the influence that President Trump is wielding in this race. Take a listen.
This man is no longer like a former president to a lot of these people. He is like a god. He is something that they look up to. And to me, a lot of times, maybe he isn't the best person to look up to. That doesn't go to say that he didn't do a lot of good things, especially for the middle class community here. But I think, once again, people are running a little bit too far with his influence.
So she is saying that former President Trump is having way too much influence. She said people should be thinking about community issues, not winning his endorsement. But I should also tell you, I talked to a number of Republican voters who say they really like President Trump. They believe the 2020 election was stolen, and they really hope that he can endorse in this race. Chris.